Despite earning university degrees, many African graduates find themselves unemployed or underemployed, which is a reality that continues to frustrate young people and their families all across the continent. We're going in the cubicle, that is our workplace feature right here on The Move. And as economies across Africa battle high youth unemployment rates, the question is no longer just about education, but about relevance, about opportunity, and the urgent need for innovation in how we prepare and transition young people into the world of work. We're speaking about this and asking the question, why do African graduates still struggle to find jobs despite having degrees? We have on the line with us Arisha Lohanga, founder and executive director of Redefine Human Capital. We're also going to be chatting in this conversation to Yusuf Sanusi Abidion, education consultant and recruitment expert. Thank you so much for your time, Arisha, and for joining us in this conversation.
Thank you for inviting me. Really excited to be with you this morning.
It is a pleasure. Well, it is a piece of paper. And unfortunately, it seems like our young people here on the continent are raking up these pieces of paper, but aren't actually able to use them. It's a beautiful thing, though. It is a positive thing that more and more young people are acquiring those university degrees, isn't it?
No, definitely. I was reading an academic paper this morning in preparation for our discussion this morning by a student, and it was quite interesting because she's done research just in terms of our unemployment in South Africa. And so she looked at the labor force survey done between 2008 and 2023, and the results from that show that graduate unemployment has doubled over the last 16 years. How can it double over the last 16 years? And, there's different reasons as to why, people's skill not matching what the market is saying. But it's a huge concern because the job market has become more competitive and saturated. And for a lot of young people, the promise of higher education is beginning to feel like a distant dream.
Absolutely. It is starting to feel like a distant dream, but we obviously cannot discourage the young people from getting university degrees because that is an additional barrier in unemployment. Yes, university graduates are unemployed or underemployed. However, I'm sure those who don't have any qualifications at all are even worse off.
100%. So even though a person might have a degree, they're also competing with people with matric results and those that actually don't even have a matric. And you're 100% right. It's not to cause despair or to cause worry. It's to look at what do I have in my hands? What options are available to me as I look for work? And if I recall when I, matriculated and got my first degree years ago, I also struggled for a period of, 7-8 months to find work. I also applied and got rejected. But for me, the most important thing was to see, okay, fine, what work could I do outside while I was waiting? So it was volunteering at the church. It was freelancing. It was, just doing things outside of just sitting and waiting, doing online courses. And the great thing about the space that we're in at the moment in the world, there is so much free online courses, free books that you can actually access online. I coach entrepreneurs across Africa, so from a graduate level up until entrepreneurs that are running multi-dollar businesses. And what I find interesting, a lot of these business owners, they have really focused on understanding the economy and how to make money.
Yeah.
Because a lot of grads, a lot of young people that get their degrees, no one has taught them how to make money.
Yeah.
And I think that's so key to understand, how do you make money? How do you sell? And it's starting off small. It's starting off with what you have within your community. So to see, what is the challenge? What is the issue does this community face? There's a saying that Africa can only solve Africa's problems. So if the gogo in the next road is not getting her pension, how can I as a young grad see a gap in that? And how do I actually create something from my own bedroom, from my own house, to actually create a solution which I can then sell?
Arisha, let's bring in Yusuf Sanusi Abidion, who is an education consultant and recruitment expert, into the conversation as well in our Zoom line. Yusuf, thank you for also joining us for this conversation.
Good morning.
Okay, we're struggling with
Can you
that
hear
line.
me?
It seems like we need to put you in a little bit of a better environment. It's very, very noisy wherever you are. But we'll continue the
Oh,
conversation with
okay.
Irisha while we sort out that line. Irisha, a qualification is an expensive exercise. And getting one even upgraded is more of an expensive exercise. So that investment, people immediately think it's going to give them a job. And they don't think they need to have that entrepreneurial muscle within them to actually pursue their dream. How do we deal with that? Because we become job seekers after getting these great qualifications and getting these skills. However, we lose the fact that most of your career is going to be self-driven.
So it's for a person just to look at their well-being. So mentally, and I mean, this sounds like it's so basic, but it's so important. So to practice positive self-talk, for example, so focus on affirming and encouraging themselves that they are walking in abundance, that they are going to achieve what they're going to achieve in life. For me personally, because I can only speak about myself, it was really about connecting from a spiritual perspective, because life is spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So to understand and really focus on understanding what is my life purpose. And I mean, for me, there was a huge thing because, yes, I also had the degree, but now what? No one's hiring me. So to understand, how do I live up my life purpose in this world? And it could be through volunteering. It could be going to government organizations like the National Youth Development Agency to understand what programs, including internships, mentorship, and entrepreneurship development that they have, that the grad doesn't necessarily have to spend money while they're waiting. In the Department of Labor as well, they have got job placement services, career counseling, training programs. You've got programs like the YES program for grads to join, where they're not getting paid, but they are getting paid a stipend, as well as your different CETAs that offer training and development programs, as well as learnerships and internships. And then you've got CEDA. So if the grad decides they have got that entrepreneurial flair, or they feel, well, that's the space that life has taken them into, going to a CEDA, understanding what free courses that they offer could also be a proactive step just to increase their chances of finding employment, gaining experience, and building a successful career or experience as well.
Well, we'll find out a little bit more about some of the proactiveness that is required from our unemployed graduates on the African continent and the innovation that they need to start going into, so they're not just unemployed or underemployed, but they're finding and creating those opportunities as well. Why do African graduates still struggle to find jobs despite having those degrees? Let us know what you think at Channel Africa 1. We're still speaking to Irisha Luhanga, founder and executive director of Redefine Human Capital. And we'll see if we can find Yusuf Sanusi Abidion, education consultant and recruitment expert, after this break.
On the Move, weekdays, 9 a.m. to midday. Only on Channel Africa. #On the Move.
Hey, it's in the cubicle feature. It's our workplace feature where we look at the place of work. At times when we are doing work, we think that, we're just going to wing it and we're just going to get it done. But this is a feature where we say, look, it is not as easy as it's made out to be. There are so many intricacies around workplace politics, workplace scenarios, and also just seeking for a job is another thing that we're focusing on today. We're asking the question, why do African graduates struggle to find jobs despite having degrees? Helping us has been Irisha Luhanga, who's a founder and executive director of Redefine Human Capital. Self-empowering elements are very important here, because I think most of the time, Irisha, we think being job seekers, as I mentioned earlier on, is going to be the remedy. Once I look for a job, I'm definitely going to find it. But where we are finding ourselves short on the African continent is us innovating ourselves, is us actually thinking that after I've got all these master's degrees, I've learned so much from this experience of education. how am I going to actually create something? So we are not creators or innovators or employers. Rather, I think there is that thing in us Africans that we are going to be the ones who are employed. Don't you think that's also part of the problem here?
100%. And I think as a job seeker, it's so important to do a SWOT analysis on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different tools that we can actually find online that can actually help us to understand what are our own strengths. So what are our talents that we bring to the world? What are our weaknesses? What are the opportunities out there for us, and what are the threats? And even in looking at a threat, for example, as can't find a job, unemployment, how do we take that threat and make it an opportunity for ourselves? So if, for example, if you see that a lot of grads, and we see this because of our high youth unemployment rate in South Africa, which you've got the highest in the world, is a challenge. How do you create that as a graduate into a business for yourself? So it's looking at a threat and saying, well, what are the threats out there? Do you know what? During COVID, there were more people that became millionaires and their businesses grew than before COVID. And the normal entrepreneur would be like, but there's no way, my business was, but guess what? It's in the threat that there's opportunities. There's also a strategy tool called Pestle, where you look at politically what's happening in the country. How, for example, are the CETAs saying they've got all these different programs and all these different opportunities for grads, but how come the grads in the townships don't even know about it? So how do we create either tools or training or communication where we get paid by the CETAs, where we get paid by CEDA, when we get paid by the NYDA to actually communicate their programs to the grads? But looking at these threats and creating opportunities, i.e. business opportunities for ourselves. We've gone past the 4IR. If you look at AI, it's a tool to help us as well. So say, for example, if English is not your first language or you're not sure how to put this together, go to Hotbot, which is the tool that I use in AI.
Yeah.
And just literally just do research how to create a communication strategy for this type of company, this industry. Hello, it's all there. Or how do I create a brochure on whatever you want to, it's all there.
Yeah.
So there are tools to actually support us. And there's so many other AI tools as a grad that we can use to market what we do. Years ago, I went down to Durban. I'm from Durban originally.
Okay.
And I went down to the township that I grew up in, and I saw youth unemployment at its highest. I saw young girls being pregnant. I saw boys on drugs. And I stood in this community and I thought to myself, I could be the person once again complaining about the youth unemployment, or I could be also part of the solution for these young individuals. And what I realized at the time, that with these young individuals, they could not see options for themselves. The ones that I spoke to, they felt stuck. Like, I've been unemployed for 3 years and 4 years and I've got the degree. And guess what? You have an option. We all have options. It's for you to sit down and decide, okay, fine, what is my gift? And how do I take my gift and how do I commercialize my gift so I can actually be innovative, make money, create a business? Yes, I know we're not all meant to be entrepreneurs, but it's our gifts that will make way, before kings and queens of the world.
Absolutely.
It's our gifts that is going to make way for us, especially if we're in the season of still waiting to get employed.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying there. When I graduated, there was something that one of the chancellors said was like, now it's your time to be an entrepreneur. I mean, we were all from different industries. And I was like, I'm definitely not an entrepreneur. There's nothing that I have that is entrepreneurial. But then when I thought about it, my mom was driving us home as we were going to, I think we went to Spur. I hardly go to Spur, but Mama, let's go to Spur and celebrate, right? We're driving all the way to Spur. And my mom was like, that was such a powerful thing that now you're on your own. And what that chancellor was saying is that now you have to pave a way for yourself. And I think at times when we think about ourselves, we think we don't deserve to be entrepreneurial, right? We think we're not entrepreneurial because even that term is intimidating itself. We think it's only about that suited person. But you as a cleaner at a workplace, you as a person who's taking out money from a client as a cashier, you are entrepreneurial in yourself. We think just you getting that month-end salary is not an entrepreneurial endeavor, but actually it is. And I think we disqualify ourselves from that entrepreneurial label because we otherize it too much. But in fact, all of us are entrepreneurial. If you're getting money every month, you must be an entrepreneur.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. I always say that I don't sell. I'm not a hunter. In sales, you get a hunter and you get a farmer. And I always say, I'm not a hunter. I don't go in.
Yeah.
The idea of making 100 calls a day to sell something, woo. But guess what? When you are living out your purpose, it's not about selling. It's about creating a solution for a community, for someone out there. When I think about, for example, I interviewed a young entrepreneur in Uganda, and her business, which I thought was fascinating, she had guys, she'd gotten some capital, she got some bicycles, and she created this chip that you could put in the bicycles where she'd have these drivers, so like your Uber or your bikers, but bicycles going out to the different farms, filling the containers on these bicycles with milk. This app, whatever she's created on top of it, would then measure it.
Wow.
Give the farmer his invoice, and then she would take it to the market, and then she would sell it. Basic concept, but brilliant concept.
Yeah.
Because that's a gap in the market that no one else saw. So I think it's about looking at oneself and saying, okay, fine, what is my purpose? And the most interesting thing, I had a coaching session this morning with someone, and I was saying to them, I was on a big mission years ago to understand what is my life purpose. Do you know all our life purpose are gifts of the Holy Spirit? And ultimately, all our purpose is love.
Mm-hmm.
And our purpose is how we show love. For some people, it's to bring goodness into the world, to bring kindness into the world.
Sure.
And the work that we do in looking for work, it needs to be a reflection of our purpose. Years ago, I went to look for happy birthday song in Zulu. And guess what? On YouTube, I could not find a song in the vernacular language on YouTube. And I was like, there is a gap.
There is a gap.
I love children's books in vernacular languages.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying?
I was just saying we've run out of time, and I think that's a good way to end it, because I think because there's so many gaps, like you using that example, that there's no happy birthday in the vernacular language, it means that we aren't creating enough. And because something exists in a particular format, we think that we don't have to create the variation of it. And I love this conversation because someone's saying, guys, come back to us graduates, what must we do? But I feel like we were actually premising this conversation on that we have to be the solutions and not always stretching out our begging bowls. But that's where we have to leave it, unfortunately, Arisha. But you've given us so many nuggets of wisdom in this one. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's Arisha. You too, Arisha. That's Arisha Luhanga, who's the founder and executive director of Redefine Human Capital. What's your take on that one? Do you think what we're saying is far-fetched? And what's your take on this one? Why graduates struggle to find jobs? Do you think they should be finding jobs, or they should be creating jobs? Or do you think someone out there is going to come and rescue our graduates here on the African continent? What's your take on this one? +27 63 406 9126.